Updating Shakespeare for 2025 and Beyond by Robert Boog. Why does Shakespeare need updating? I had a college professor who said that we know more about Jesus of Nazareth preaching than we do William Shakespeare writing anything. I mean, two accounts witness Jesus giving a Sermon on the Mount, but there's not one shred of William Shakespeare's handwriting that we know with 100% certainty. No journals, no old plays, no accounts of travel, no book receipts, nor any eyewitnesses claiming that they saw him writing anything. Hi, my name is Robert Boog. I'm a real estate broker, the author of a couple of books on Shakespeare. I do not claim to be a scholar. I want to use common sense and how the average person looks at the Shakespeare authorship debate. Because some things do not make sense. That William Shakespeare never lived in the house long accepted as his birthplace. So if William Shakespeare was born in the Birthplace Trust Home in 1564, then why is it facing in the wrong direction? I mean, in 1552, John Shakespeare left a muck heap on Henley Street. Now, a muck heap is like a big pile of poo. And he and Adrian Queenie were fined 1 shilling. And again, this is from the same book, Shakespeare's House, a window onto his life and legacy. It shows that they fined him 1 shilling for dumping feces into the gutter on Henley Street. So they're saying that he left it at his front door, right? This is Henley Street. And I don't think so. I don't think he would do that. I'm going to move on just for a second. We'll get back to it. Then in 1556, John won a lawsuit and bought 2 properties. The annual rent was 6 pence for each one, meaning that each lot was only 30 feet wide. We know that Shakespeare was born in 1564. And here's the Latin for that. See if I can make that bigger. But what they're saying is that in it there's a garden, and the garden was in the back, and this is what I want to look at. So that currently this is how the Shakespeare house looks, the Birthplace Trust Home. It's 90 feet wide, and the lot was only 30 foot wide in 1556. That's when John bought it, putting these 3 buses onto a lot that is just 1 bus wide. So how did they do it? Let's eat Grandpa, or let's eat Grandpa. I say that because when you're translating the Latin, it can be looked at as also that Edward West transferred to the aforementioned John Shakespeare 1 tent with garden adjacent in Henley Street, or also that Edward West transferred to the aforementioned John Shakespeare 1 tent with garden adjacent in Henley Street. So is the house adjacent, or is the garden adjacent? That's the burning question here. And here is the Latin again. It says 1 or unum, 10. It actually says tent, the T. So the person here is implying that it actually means tenementum, the Latin. Cone garden, with garden, adjacent in Henley Street. Okay, so, and this is that 6 pence, the rent. So the question is, was the garden facing the Guild Pits or with garden adjacent in Henley Street? This makes more sense to me, especially if you're selling gloves. Now, Guild Pits, this is kind of a nickname because it was actually also called the Queen's Highway. So the tent, we called it a wool shop, probably looked something like this. Or it could have been a portable dwelling, something like this, that they could move out into the street, because the Guild Pits was, if you think of a floodplain, it was like this huge, wide road. So I asked artificial intelligence, is tent an abbreviation of the word tenement? It said no. It means a tent, a collapsible shelter made of fabric that is supported by poles and used as a temporary dwelling. It comes from the French word tente. What about, was tent an abbreviation for the Latin word tenementum? No, tent was not an abbreviation for the Latin word tenementum. While tent comes from the Latin word tentorium, which means a portable shelter or dwelling, tenementum referred to properties such as land or buildings that could be held or rented. Okay, so I don't want to get into a discussion on this, just that we don't really know what the person who wrote that Latin meant. So why a portable dwelling? Is it possible? Well, there's all kinds of water here. And this is the street, Henley Street, and here is the Guild Street, or what they call the Guild Pits. So the road to London went like this, and up to Birmingham went this way. Here's another older map of it. And again, you see the Guild Pits is right here. So Shakespeare's property was probably around there. And you can see how all the space over here was probably just open space. The city limits was the Guild Pits. So somebody could have brought their little tent in the middle of the road here to attract more buyers. In 1552, wouldn't you put your shop in front of the Queen's Highway, or your wool shop here in front of the Guild Pits, and the garden adjacent in Henley Street? You're not going to go to the bathroom in front of a lot of people, so you would go in the back where there's nobody. We don't even know. This street was probably a dirt road, and when they say garden in Henley Street, it was probably growing here. It was probably using part of Henley Street to grow food. So common sense tells us that it is possible, right? Okay, so then after 1597, we see that John Shakespeare sells this parcel here. It's a 1.5 by 84 foot piece of property. He sells it to his neighbor, George Badger. In 1598, he sells a square, 17 by 17, to his neighbor, Edward Willis. Now, why would he do that? If the garden was in front here, like we were talking about, this is the space where he could put this 90-foot house. And here in 1638, it says here that Edward Willis did about 40 years since purchase to him and his heirs from one Shakespeare, one parcel of land containing about 17 foot square, next adjoining to his tenement. So this is from the Outlines of the Life of Shakespeare by Halliwell Phillips. So you have 1598, the year that John sells the 17-foot square. If you subtract 21, because most leases were for about 21 years, you get 1577. If you subtract 21 again, this was the year that John bought the property. So I believe it was rented for 42 years, and then he finally sold a chunk of it to his neighbor, who was probably renting out that wool shop the whole time. After all, how could John Shakespeare build a 90-foot wide house? Well, the answer is that in 1556, we know he bought this 30-foot wide property with the garden adjacent in Henley Street. Then in 1575, he purchased from Edmund and Emma Hall this property that was 65 foot wide. And again, this fronted the Queen's Highway, which was the major road between London and Birmingham. This allowed him to build this house in 1598. And by him, it was most likely William building it. So the purchase of the property in 1575 had two messuages, or houses. The 1556 did not mention any messuages, only that, if you want to call it a tent, or if you want to call this entire thing a tenement, just a holding of land that could be rented. It may have had this shop on it the whole time. We don't know. But after he sold it, this big property here could have been like 60 foot wide, and there would still be room because this lot is 84 feet deep. So around 60 foot would be about here. He could take up this whole lot, still have that room for the shed or wool shop to sell to Mr. Willis. This raises the question, where did John and his family go if, renting out the property in 1556? This takes us to this two conveyances of property in Warwickshire by William Clopton, showing John Shakespeare as a tenant of Ingon Meadow. And I've done this before, but if you go to page 2, and you see this serrated edge here, count down 20 lines from here, and you'll see the name right here, John Shakespeare, or his assigns, and it says he's in Ingon alias Ingon Meadow, by estimation 14 acres, be it more or late now or late in the tenure or occupation of John Shakespeare. And it also refers to him having access to an additional 107 acres. And this is interesting too because there's a close-up on it. Right here it mentions a windmill. See that? Windmill. So he has a windmill on it, and he's got access to 107 acres. Okay, so now if you go to page 4 here, and you see this serrated edge, that's where we're going to go now. And I'll double click it to make it a little bit bigger for you. And here's where you can see for term of 21 years. This was John Shakespeare's lease. And right here it has the date. So it says here, before the first day of May in the year of our Lord Christ, 1563. So that's 1564. That's when this contract or lease agreement started. So it says, this is from Halliwell again. He's talking about this little 14-acre farm. The annual rent was £8, which is above market rent, near 3 times more than the usual rent of that time. So why was it so high? Probably there was a good dwelling house and orchard upon it. And here's the date again, before the first day of May in the year, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what this means is that William did not attend a Latin-only school. He lived too far away from the school to attend 16-hour days learning Latin. There's no way. There's no way he's going to walk like 2 miles to go to school till 6:30 at night and then wake up and the next morning and do it again. I'm not buying it. means his father was a farmer, a yeoman, and his, Mrs. Shakespeare was probably helping him, along with his brothers. The whole family got into it. This was a farming town. If not William, then who and why? That's what we will be talking about. We're going to view digitized documents just like we did a minute ago. We're going to use common sense too, not have this super biased opinion that everything has to relate to William, especially when it comes to spelling. I'm going to show you some things that you've never seen before. And we'll try to correct the mistakes of the past. That's why we're updating. Because we've had 400 years of what I call Gigi's ham. Gigi stands for great grandma. And one day Julie was wanting to cook a ham, and she said to her mom, "Mom, show me how to cook a ham." And the first thing her mom did was she cut 4 inches from both sides of the ham, and then she put it into her pan. Julie said, "Why do you waste so much meat?" And her mother said, "Well, that's the way my mother taught me." And Julie called her grandmother, and she asked her, "Grandma, do you shave 4 inches off each side of the ham?" And her grandma said, "Yeah." "Why?" "Well, that's the way my mother showed me, or taught me." So when Gigi came around, Julie asked her, "Great grandma, why did you shave 4 inches off the sides of the ham?" And her great grandmother said, "Julie, that was the only way the ham would fit into my tiny pan." And that's what we've been doing. We're acting like Gigi here. When it comes to Shakespeare, we never really question his authorship because his name is on the title. So there are all these videos that will say the same thing. Did Shakespeare really write his plays? And they'll all answer yes, because his name is on the title. And that's the way we've always done it. Anyway, thanks for watching. This is the end. In the next episode of Updating Shakespeare, I'm going to change your biased view that many people have about what I call Shakespeare. I think that there was a man named Shakespeare who was a front for Edward de Vere. But I'll give you the resources for both the Stratford Faithful and Oxfordian so you can look at it yourself. I'm going to talk about the 7 major objections for Oxford's authorship. And then we'll go into the objective proof for Shakespeare. Talk about the places, puns, priam, spelling, and much more. So if you're interested, check out the next episode. I'll be uploading it soon. And thanks for watching again, and I'll see you on the next one.